Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. Um, if Matt joins us, he'll just, join us when he does. Okay, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. It's 6:34. Julie, if you could roll call us to start.
Yep. JC Herman,
Yes.
Elaine Siegel,
Yes.
Natalie Sully.
Here.
Oh, yes,
Do
here.
I announce the people who should be here?
I think you just note that they're not here, and if Matt joins us, then you can add him like you did in the June one with Elaine.
Great.
When he joins and what time. Oh yes, we do have a quorum, right? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from June 2nd, 2022?
JC, we actually can't vote on those if we don't have more people because I wasn't at that meeting.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you for the reminder. All right, so
yeah,
we'll take that. Thank you. I forgot that you weren't there. It's been so long. All right, we'll table that for next time around. There's no old business, so that brings us to the new business. So just some updates. I'd sent a lot of this out in email, but I just want to make sure you all are aware of things that are happening in board meetings and such. So clearly Aisha was officially hired. She signed her contract and she is working with us. Elaine, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet with her. She's been doing interviews. If you haven't had a chance, if you're able to set up a time with her, she'll just take like 30 minutes to ask you about the committee and the history of the committee and that sort of stuff.
Sure, I'd love to do that.
So she can gather information. If you want, I can send you her email separate, or it went in at least one of the emails that went out for the committee. But if it's easier, I can just send it to you directly. So
yeah, I have Aisha's email.
Oh, fantastic. Also, I mean, I guess Elaine, a lot of this is just for you since Natalie is at the board meeting. There was a new board member that was appointed, Diane Anton. I actually emailed her to ask if she's interested in joining the committee. I have not heard back from her yet, but I will let you all know what I hear. And on that note, just something to keep in mind. I just wanted, for us to all remember that there's elections next spring, and there's 3 board member spots that will that the election will be for, right? Because both Anton and Rogers were appointed. So if they want to stay on the board, they need to be voted in the next election. And from my understanding, and maybe things have changed, but from my understanding, Debbie Braun is not going to be running again. And her term is up. So as we move towards that, I want us, to kind of be aware of that and decide how we as a committee want to approach the elections. I mean, I know there's, restrictions and guidelines and such of like we have to follow in terms of the election process. But I want to make sure that we're keeping that on our radar. I wanted to let you know that the board has approved hiring a firm to lead the search for the new director. Just as a reminder, Brian is retiring at the right around the elections next year, like right after, right, Natalie? It's like I'm in denial, so I'm trying to pretend like there's not an end date to Brian being there, to be honest with you. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the other agenda item. I'm sorry, was someone trying to say something? Okay.
I just said same. I was agreeing with you. I'm in denial as well.
All right, and then I'll send this out in an email before our next meeting also. But one of the things that Aisha recommended was that we have a conversation about why we all do this work and what's bringing us here. Rather than just kind of spring that on you in a meeting. I was hoping by the time we meet again that you'll have some time to think it through so you can come with like a really thoughtful answer. And then I wanted to tag on there. I don't know if you remember when we interviewed Dr. Logan, one of the things that he had brought up was the idea of motivation, of what motivates you to do this work. And I thought that would be an interesting addition to that question as we move forward. And then I'll remind you before the next meeting, so you guys are all ready for that. Does anybody have any questions about any of the updates? Okay. Aisha, I will pass things over to you then, so you can chat with us about how things are going so far and all that sort of good stuff.
Sure. I will just share an update about what I've been doing, which has been reviewing previous meetings, reviewing all documents that were prepared before, basically doing a full audit. And part of that audit is the interviews. So any interviews that anyone is open and willing and has the capacity to do, I'm open to that because I'm trying to get a sense of where the committee has been and also views on where the committee should go and what the work should be. And so it's useful and helpful to hear directly from all of you about that, as well as reviewing the material that sort of sets out the pathway and the guideline. My hope for doing that is to then be able to identify recommendations for next steps to help in solidifying more concrete goals and focus areas for the committee moving forward. And so JC and I will be having some conversations and talking about some of the things that I find from that. And then obviously that will then filter down to these meetings as well. So that's my update, and really just a request for interviews, because that gives me really the most live information about the experience in the past and where we should go. Hearing directly from you all and your experience is really, really useful. So that's my update.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Okay. Aisha, I know in the RFP, there was a section about like specific goals that we were wanting to like prioritize and work on. Are you like, is the interviewing and that kind of stuff, is that helping kind of flesh those out and make them more specific?
It is.
And
it's
okay.
Yes. And it's helping to make sure that what was identified in the RFP actually aligns with what was identified as the work to be done, and then also what you all are sharing as the work that needs to be done now that we're here at this time in space.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Aisha, I'm assuming you have not met with Matt Rogers yet?
I have not. No.
Okay. And have you had a chance to meet with Andrew?
No.
No? Okay. I will reach out to the two of them again and see if we can get that set up. Okay. That brings us to the director search. So before I go into this stuff specifically, so I'm hoping like when this whole thing opens up that Natalie will be applying for this position. And I personally, I'm clearly very biased, right? Like I wear a lot of different hats in the Park District. I personally think that Natalie is the person who should be hired into Brian's position for a lot of different reasons. But of course, we are not a decision-making body, so we don't really get to make any sort of recommendation as to what they're going to do. But so I wanted, and I had texted with Natalie earlier. I personally, if I were in Natalie's boat and other people were discussing a position that I was hoping to get, I would feel really uncomfortable being part of those conversations being had in a sort of way where like, because it's a government institution, like there's certain processes that have to happen. So I let her know if she wants to bow out of this conversation, or if you all would feel more comfortable with Natalie not being here for this part, we can make those arrangements. I I want to be respectful of everybody's feelings that are involved, because I think, I mean, I know I feel like I have a lot invested in this, and it really has very little to do with me. So I can only imagine, how Natalie's feeling. So Natalie, if you want to, like, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would just first of all say thank you for acknowledging me publicly, and acknowledging that I am a part of this process, and that there is a lot of, there's a lot invested for me, just in terms of like both my career and emotionally. I've been in the job for a long time. So it feels nice to be acknowledged that I am a part of the process. So thank you for doing that. I am not uncomfortable being a part of the conversation within the REDI committee, because I think which I said to you earlier today, because I think our job as a committee is to just make sure that the board goes about this from beginning to end through the equity lens that we put together. And I think, if there's recommendations, whether it's me or not, like, it still needs to be, equity has to be at the forefront of the process. And so I think just reminding the board of that, and if we, in the discussion, come up with specific recommendations for them on how to do that, or even just to gently remind them that needs to be a part of the process. The firm you mentioned earlier that they're hiring is the Illinois Association of Park Districts that we're a part of, and have been since, like, I think its inception. We were one of the first Illinois park districts to be a part of that in 1939. So they're going to do a terrific job. It's going to be a very thorough process. They're going to interview all of the commissioners. They're going to do kind of a deep dive into our audits and our budget and all of that. And I would assume interview staff too, and spend a lot of time with Brian putting together a whole package for this position. So, and then they will help do the search, and then I imagine the interviews and the whole thing. So, but I think reminding the board or making suggestions to them on how to even go about their interviews with IAPD through an equity lens, I think that's really important. So I'm happy to be a part of those conversations. That being said, if it's not comfortable for the rest of the committee for me to be a part of those conversations, I'm also happy to, like, dismiss myself. If that's what people would prefer, that's perfectly fine with me. So.
Well, let me just say that and I'm happy to have you here, or if you're more comfortable, recusing yourself, that's fine too. But if the appropriate way would be to go into closed session. Otherwise, it's a public discussion, whether you're here or not. Now, whether anybody tunes into those is another question. Maybe there's very little chance that would be something that would come out. And there's nothing to say that were we to have a confidential conversation and were that to come into issue subsequently, I can think of scenarios where another applicant, for example, might object that you went in that the board went into the selection process and you were anointed before anybody got there and no one else had a fair chance. For example, I can imagine somebody saying something like that. And were that to be the case, a closed session discussion might or might not be something that would be appropriately considered, or even be evidence in a certain situation. So if we want to do a confidential conversation, I'd suggest that we go into closed session. And if the point, Natalie, is just your own personal comfort with this immediate conversation, without regard to whether or not somebody can see it down the line, we can do it either way.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, Elaine, do you think we would need to go to a closed session if we're just talking generally about what the committee's role would be in, or only if we're speaking about, like, specific candidates?
No, I don't think that we can talk about those things in open session, and that's what we would be doing. And the fact that Natalie wouldn't participate wouldn't shelter it from public disclosure. And that could be something that later on could be deemed to be something that's unfair to other candidates, for example. So that's what I'm saying. And so if we want to have a confidential discussion, we should make it confidential and go into closed session. And I don't think it was on the agenda.
No, not a closed session. Sorry,
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I think, transparency is important to me. So as a committee, just discussing what our role may or may not be in this process, I think having those discussions publicly is important. If we get down the road and the board says, hey, REDI committee, I want you to review these candidates and have a conversation about them, that should absolutely be in closed session, and I should absolutely not be a part of that. But I think for right now, especially as we're going into it, I think maybe even it's just a matter of JC at the next board meeting putting on the agenda, asking the board, how do you see the committee's engagement in this process? What do you want us to do to be a part of it? Obviously, it needs to happen through an equity lens. How can we help support that work? How do you see us fitting into this? And maybe just kind of letting them, giving them the opportunity to kind of steer our participation, and by reminding them that we should be a part of it.
I think that makes sense. Aisha had recommended some kind of questions for us to think through in this. I think it's worth, and I personally feel comfortable talking about this level of stuff in an open meeting.
I was gonna agree with what JC was saying. I gave her a list of sort of guiding questions to help a conversation around decision making about talking to the board about this committee's connection to the process, the why, the impact, and thinking through those things before going to the board and talking about how this committee should be involved. There is, I think, when you get down to talking about aiding and developing questions for candidates that are around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that's the place where you would have to consider if a candidate has access to that before other candidates, or how do you make sure that all candidates have access to the information before they all interview. So if they have access to this meeting or whichever meeting it is, or if that takes place in a public setting, them having access to the conversation, I think is the appropriate way to do that.
I knew this was going to be a little complicated. I appreciate you all bringing these details up, because I want to make sure that we're doing this the right way and the best way. Okay, so I'm going to run through some of the stuff that Aisha recommended. Just so everyone knows, historically, the REDI committee has never been a part of any process like this before, not for hiring an employee. We were not involved in either the appointments of the commissioners that got appointed this year. Just something that we should probably think about moving forward is that maybe we should be involved in those appointments, or at least, making sure that they're using the equity lens when they're making those decisions. And, just a reminder again, we're not a decision-making body. So we don't get to tell the board, this is how we're going to participate. We just have to hope that they'll involve us in the ways that we think will be, valuable and important. So one of the questions that Aisha had asked was, what's the potential impact of the REDI committee? What's the potential impact that we could have by participating in the hiring process? For me, one of the first things that comes to mind, I would be so sorely disappointed if they were to hire somebody who's not dedicated and really working to move forward with the equity work that we have in place. I think to me, that's really where I would like to have our impact be, is to make that be a significant part of the hiring process. You know, we've been on this journey for a while now, and to have somebody come in who's really going to take that on as a major point of that position, I think is really important. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas on that, the potential impact that we could have.
I do think that that's really important, JC. And I think I did a workshop with the YW a couple months ago, and one of the things that was brought up was about like an equity mission. Like, how do you fit into like the equity mission of the organization, but also like what is your own personal equity mission that you bring to the work? And I think it's important that the candidates at least be familiar with like the language that we're using at Ridgeville. Like, I think that they should obviously be committed to equity in their own way and have their own personal mission. But I think in looking at the bigger picture, you know, we've spent so much time now with, we spent so much time with Pat going through trainings and establishing a common language among the committee members, the board, the staff. And that's going to continue to develop with Aisha. And I think that it's just important that the candidates become familiar with that and have access to all of that information. And so, yeah. So I agree with you.
I also think that having this committee's involvement can send that message to candidates that this committee works with the board, and their opinion and what they're bringing to the table is valuable enough to this process that they are included in it. So I think that can set candidates up to know that the board values the REDI committee by the action of including the committee in the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'd also suggest that that the involvement of this committee is something that can invigorate the discussion that the board would ordinarily have, and bring a focus to the issues that otherwise might not be as clear. Can contribute, and I'd hope that we'd be in a position to be able to do that, and to work with broaden the understanding of the equity lens and how it works and how it can be used in the process of of looking at whether it's looking at new board members or looking at new personnel or whatever it is. And I think that that's the focus of the board is different. It certainly has a lot in common with it, but the focus of the board is necessarily wider than what it is that that this committee is homed in on, and it should be that way. They have a lot of responsibilities that are not directly related, and on the other hand, we have the luxury of being able to work on this one set of critical issues and to make that kind of our specialty, if you will.
Thank you. Those are good points. Yeah. The next question, what kind of precedents would be set whether we participated or not? Right? Like I envision moving forward that the REDI committee would be involved in all of these sorts of decisions moving forward, so that we can make sure that the equity lens is being used and that decisions are being made in line with the changes that we want to see coming. And I think that if the committee were to participate in looking for the director, I think that would make it easier for us to participate in other situations like that moving forward.
I think what you mentioned earlier makes a lot of sense in terms of like the commissioner appointments. I think setting a precedent that the REDI committee, and I don't know exactly what it is yet, but like have some kind of involvement in senior staff and commissioner appointments or staffing. Because I know, depending on who the person is that's hired for the position, there might be other staffing needs at that point. There might be additional staff added. People might get moved around, who knows? So, I mean, there's going to be other staffing potentially necessary. And so I think by setting the precedent now and at least asking to be a part of, a specific process, I think is really important.
I agree. I mean, especially taking into consideration, right, like the board oversees the director, and then the director oversees the rest of the staff, right? So by having the REDI committee being involved in those like senior staff, then hopefully will help make sure that trickles down to the other staff. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting this thought out. If we are participating in choosing those people, most likely those people are going to echo that commitment to equity and hire the other staff in the same way that we're hiring them. So I think that's important. Does anybody see any reason for us not to participate in, in terms of setting this precedent? Matt, I just wanted to say hi. I saw you pop in.
Hello.
Just so you know, we are at the meeting, the agenda item of talking about the director search and
Okay.
The hope of having the REDI committee be a part of that process. All right, so the next question is oh, hold on, I wrote that one twice. So because the firm is being hired to do the search, it's going to be a little bit different than if it was just happening in-house. But some of the things that we, can think about in terms of, if we're allowed to participate, how we would want to do that. It's like how many, we don't have to make these decisions now, but just something for us to think about moving forward. If REDI committee members were allowed to be a part of the interview process, how many of us should participate in that, thinking about, in terms of setting a precedent, what would be realistic for us to maintain, not only during this interview process, but moving forward. That, again, depending on how the firm, I know Natalie, like you said, they're going to be interviewing the commissioners. Is it that, that some REDI committee members get interviewed also, or, in those same meetings, how that might look. And, how we can make sure that we are bridging with the board members of, really making it clear this commitment that we are asking Ridgeville to have towards, equity and diversity inclusion. And what kind of questions we would want to be asked to make sure that those priorities are brought to the forefront. I think this process isn't going to be starting for a while. I'm happy that we're thinking about it early, because I think that we need to plan for this appropriately. Especially keeping in mind, since the board only meets once a month, we want to make sure that we give them plenty of opportunity to think through what we're asking. And so we can come up with a plan so that when the interview process actually starts, we're ready to go. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. I don't know that it's quite worth discussing any of these questions yet. I think it's something for us to start thinking about.
Just a quick note, JC, it's going to start sooner than you think it is. Brian already had a meeting with the IAPD this week. So I don't know. I don't think he has a timeline yet, but I know that they are starting to sort that stuff out. So I think it's probably important if the committee is going to make recommendations to the board or ask to participate in some way, that we be prepared to do that at the September meeting.
Okay. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure how we'd go about answering these questions. We don't know exactly how the firm would be doing their search. Like, that's kind of where I get lost. Like, how do we want to approach this with the board in September? Do we want to tell them already, like, how many committee members we think should be involved? Do we want to, come to them with a pretty solidified plan?
Yeah, I think you need to go with a pretty clear request. And we can figure out what that means tonight. And even if it is, I don't think that every single REDI committee member needs to be a part of the process. We can discuss whatever we need to discuss in committee meetings, and I can recuse myself as needed. But maybe it's an ask that JC gets to be a part of that process as the chair. And then if you have, you can come and talk to us and we can put things together. And then, and I think that's, as the chair of the committee, I think it makes sense for you to be the person closely tied to that. But I think, we should figure out tonight specifically what the request is, and then let them consider that and make a decision.
Aisha, what would your recommendations be?
That's my recommendation, is to have a concrete structure and then to have the board then share whether or not that structure fits with the current process. And then we can adjust that structure to make sure that it fits with whatever the process is. I think it's important also to think about sustainability. So not creating a plan that is not sustainable over time is also going to be really important. And to also think about having a concrete why it's important for this committee to have a hand in that process, and what it means for hiring through a lens that considers diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what this committee has the capacity to contribute to that, and laying that out. And I think that with developing sort of interview questions that lean in that direction can be helpful in that process, as well as having that concrete structure. And then also thinking through, if this concrete structure doesn't work, what's at least one alternative to, let's say if it's two REDI committee members, the backup is just one, it's just the chair that needs to participate. So that then too, we're ready to with that shift in case that needs to be made. So that's my recommendation, is a concrete structure. And so those questions will help to get to what that concrete structure is. So how many REDI members? Should there be a separate interview? We could say that's not part of the process, but if it needs to be because of how the structure is set up, that's an option that we would like to offer. And then again, those concrete questions. If the board deems that this committee can't participate in the process for some reason, then the committee can help to influence the process by having questions that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're making sure that every candidate is at least reflecting on diversity, equity, and inclusion in their interview, even if we're not present.
So I'll say, as the board member present, that it is important to have input from the REDI committee on the hiring process. And you will be one of the stakeholders that we will be looking to solicit input from, and that could, will include, possibly meeting with candidates as part of a group, because we're going to want people from in the community itself also to meet this person. It's not going to be the five of us sitting there going, okay, we're the only ones talking to this person and we're going to come up with our own questions and that's that. So I imagine, that the process will take some time, and we will ask for, once we've kind of figured out who we're interviewing, setting it up so that there's time for those people to meet with stakeholders, and I view REDI as an important stakeholder in that meeting, as well as maybe meeting with some of the parents or instructors or other groups that we work with to get input, so that we have a broad community consensus on that, as opposed to again, just 5 of us sitting there looking through resumes and meeting with 2 people and saying, okay, this is who we're going to hire, sort of thing.
I really appreciate that. I mean, I know the board members are all dedicated to the park district, but I having that inside view of what happens within the walls on a daily basis comes from the community. So I appreciate that you all are keeping that in mind.
And we've not discussed that yet. We haven't gotten to the point of discussing our structure of the system, and that's how I see it working. I mean, that's kind of how the city has done it with city managers, although that we probably shouldn't use that as a really strong role model right now. But that's kind of the model that has worked, and it saves time for everybody involved too, because we kind of want to. It's kind of like we did with the equity coordinator position, where we ask you guys to sort of filter down who you would be wanting to talk to, and then present that list to us so that we knew everybody was a good, valuable candidate, and then we would do our process. And I think it's the same way, but kind of in reverse. So we will nail down, these are the 3 people we want to interview, and we will ask them for input. All 3 of these we view as viable candidates. We want your input about your particular view on your constituency, whether that be, again, instructors, parents, just community members in general, or the REDI committee itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds fantastic. And I think, Aisha, I think your idea of in the September board meeting, saying that we would like to have myself as the chair and 1 other committee member, available to help with all this, and, in the ways that the board see as being, valuable. I think that, making sure, even if we're not writing the questions, making sure that there are questions about diversity and inclusion in the interview process. I don't know if, and I'm not good at remembering acronyms, but the firm that the park district is using, I don't know if anyone's even brought to their attention yet that this is a focus of what, we're hoping to be a good part of whoever's coming on to take on the equity work.
So it's not really a firm, it's an organization.
Yes,
and so I think that a lot of park districts are looking at these sorts of issues. So I would imagine that it's on their radar somewhere. How high on their radar, I don't know, but I'm sure that that's part of something, because I'm sure they're getting asked that regularly through their member parks.
I would assume so too, but I do also just want to make sure that the depth to which we're doing this, right? This isn't just a matter of having our staff go through training. We're really looking to do a little bit more than that. I want to make sure that that is something that's understood too, right? That it's not just this, we're going to put up on our website that the staff has been trained in equity and diversity, but that we're also, working to rewrite some of these policies and parts of the charter that need to be more explicitly anti-racist than what they are right now. I think, and I think this comes up a lot, when we talk about equity work between, just focusing on race or focusing on the broader picture, just doing the what I see as the initial steps of training versus really making sure that an organization through and through, from written paperwork to how people are greeted at the doors, reflecting this idea of equity inclusion, functioning in a way that reflects our neighborhood. I think when people talk about equity, I think there's those 2 layers to it. And I want to make sure that the candidate and the organization understand that we're talking about this deeper layer, not just this beginning stuff of training and certification.
Right, and in looking through what IAPD is going to put together for us, part of that involves, who we are as a district, who we want to be as a district, types of programming we offer, our facilities, all of that sort of stuff. And I think the fact that we have designated a specific REDI committee sort of speaks to the fact that this is something that we are interested in addressing as well. This isn't like we have somebody come in and talk to us every 2 weeks, every 2 months or something and say, this sort of stuff. So I think that will be part of our profile that is shared with potential candidates as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd like to make sure that that's the case, because I think that's going to be really crucial moving forward. Let me see what other I guess the last
Aisha, I'm sorry, JC, while you're looking at that, I just wanted to ask Aisha how that was sounding to her. What do you make of this kind of structure that we're beginning to talk about? And how does that square with your experience, with what makes an effective role for a committee to be able to play in these kinds of larger decision-making processes?
Yeah, I think because of the proximity that this role has to this very specific work, that it has to be very clear to the candidates that this is a part of the expectation, and this is a part of what you're stepping into and walking into. To have a REDI committee member participate as in the interview process is useful and helpful. One, because you're coming with a very specific perspective and knowledge base, and it's helpful for interviewees as well as for the interviewer. So they have access to the history of the committee in a way that they wouldn't if there wasn't representation. So I would think it's important for there to be at least JC present. And if not, again, going back to having very specific questions that are asked to make sure that there is some reflection or someone collecting information about how they're thinking about their approaches to the work, so that when they get into the work, that some things are not surprises. And then also someone, if a REDI committee member is not able to be present, that there's someone present that can speak to the work of this committee for the candidates, because that will also be important for them to have a full grasp and understanding.
I feel I took some notes of what we talked about. I think I feel pretty comfortable going to the next board meeting. I was about to say next week. It's not next week. Next board meeting to make recommendations of how we participate moving forward. One question that I have, and Elaine, this would be mostly directed towards you. I mean, clearly, I think this question would need to go to, or maybe it would, I don't know, to Charles too, am I going to come into conflict of interest in this at some point because Natalie and I are friends and I'm an employee at the Park District?
I wouldn't say that a friendship per se would constitute a conflict of interest. I would think that lots of us have close ties to Natalie and other people that are involved. I think that's very positive. But there are other kinds of things that could be more specific that could rise to the level of a conflict of interest. For example, if some program that you're working on became a focus of inquiry, then you could have a conflict of interest. And I think that probably a lot of that would be pretty obvious. And most of us are sensitive to those kinds of conflicts, and that we're trying to keep the process to be free from those kinds of those kinds of overshadowing influences on the decision-making process.
Okay, I just want to make sure, like, as we're making these recommendations moving forward, that this isn't going to be something, you know, like 2 months from now, we're going to realize that I'm not the right person to have at the meeting for one reason or another because of how many different hats I wear there, or, you know, whatever it might be.
I think you've got to make that choice on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
You know, there's no one size fits all, and I'm not seeing this as being a process in which there's some kind of built-in conflict that you'd have to that would call for you recusing yourself, or that would free yourself from having to recuse yourself on appropriate occasions.
I mean, I don't think since you are not one of the final decision makers, I don't know that it really would rise to that level. You know, and so I wouldn't be horribly worried about that. Because you're just like we would go and listen to a citizen talk about something on a different matter, that they want a different program or something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that if that person isn't voting on the final decision for who the executive director is going to be, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're thinking this all the way through.
It's like, I mean, I'm sure Natalie will meet with the person as well. I would expect staff to meet with any candidate. And so that would be no different than that, really, in my opinion.
Okay. If at any point anyone feels like there is a conflict and I'm missing it, please point it out to me.
JC, if it makes you feel any better, I have relationships with everybody. So I think if, you know, I think what everybody has said is true. If something comes up specifically that makes you uncomfortable or makes the board or anybody else feel uncomfortable, you know, you can always step away from that process. But, you know, I worked with these people for 6 years. Like, I have relationships with everybody. So I think we'll all be professional and it'll be okay.
Okay. And I'm not a decision maker. So that, you know, I know that's a huge piece of it. I just want to make sure we're doing everything right. Is there anything else that anyone thinks that I should bring to the board's attention in the September meeting? I have, you know, that ideally, you know, 1 or 2 people from the committee should be participating in the interview process, and that hopefully either myself and another committee member can also be interviewed along with the commissioners. Making sure that the DEI work is in the forefront when candidates are, you know, becoming aware of this position. And, you know, the idea that in the interview questions that there should definitely be some questions about equity and diversity in those. Is there anything else I'm missing that I should include?
Just a reminder, when I send out the agenda for the September meeting, if you can send me back a written report with this stuff in it, so I can include it in the packet, just so that they have time to like look over what you're asking.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, I'll make sure I get that to you in time for you to get out to everybody. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up about the director search? Okay. I will, you know, keep you all updated. I mean, we'll be meeting regularly again, which will be really nice. But I will keep you all updated after the next board meeting, you know, if anything new comes up or, you know, what kind of responses we get to our recommendations. That brings us to call of the committee. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share? Yes, Natalie.
We have block party on there, right? On the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, we skipped that.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Real fast. We're supposed to have a block party on Saturday. This is an accumulation. Is that the right word?
I don't know. Where you're going, so.
I don't either. This is like, I did a bunch of work with Tracy Olasimbo over the past year, and it's all kind of been leading up. Thank you. Culmination. There it is. So a lot of the work that I had done with her was to kind of prepare for this block party. So I have put a lot of time and energy into this thing. And if the rain ruins it for us.
I was gonna say, what's the weather supposed to be? I was just looking
up.
up.
It's not great, Matt. It's not great.
No,
it's not great. Not great.
I see a thundercloud with an 80% underneath it, which is never a good thing. So
it's not great. I was saying earlier, it started out that the rain was going to happen, and it kept like throughout the week. It's been pushed back later and later, and now it's being pushed back forward and forward, and so now it looks like it's starting at 9. Anyway, it's not going to rain. And since it's not going to rain, we're going to have a great block party. And the REDI committee is participating. The participation from the REDI committee is going to be a friendship rock painting and story corner with the Nolans. So all 3 of Iden's kids have picked out books, and they're going to read an equity-centered book on the hour every hour. So that's happening. JC's going to be there. She's going to be recruiting committee members and steering the ship on friendship rock painting and supporting me mentally and emotionally. It's going to be great. So I'm just letting you all know that that's happening on Saturday from 11 to 3 at Reva Park. If it doesn't happen for some wild reason, we're going to try to reschedule for a different date, but we're getting pretty late into the year, so I don't know if we can do that. But anyway, I hope we see you. Please come say hi and tell the weather gods to cool it.
Yeah, I move that it not rain on Saturday.
Yeah, I really stressing me out. It's really stressing me out. So I vote no rain.
Agreed.
That's it.
Natalie, what's the October 15th? Did you find out who agreed for that?
Yeah, Josh did, and I think V is going to go with him, and Jana.
Okay.
We were invited to a resource fair at Robert Crown that's being hosted by Robin. It's a state rep.
Gable.
Yes. Thank you. They're hosting a resource fair at Robert Crown on August 15th from 10 to 2. I will be in Alaska celebrating my 40th birthday. So, but we will be there. We will have a presence and stop by and say hey.
Okay, good. I want to make sure you had someone to cover for that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to add for call commissioners? Call committee members, I mean.
I reached out to you, Aisha, sent you an email because I haven't been interviewed yet. And I don't know if you got it or not, or I may have gone to spam since it's the first time I'm emailing you. Sometimes that happens.
I will check. I definitely did not get it, so I'll check my spam.
I can resend it too if you
okay,
want.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. I think if she can eventually get around to all of us, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I just missed it in the notes that were going around, so I apologize for that. So
no worries.
I get too many emails.
I've actually done a good job unsubscribing from a lot of stuff lately. I've been very proud of it.
Well, see, I am the contact though for a website for the church that I work at. So all the people who send in something through the website comes to me. So I get like 10 to 12 different messages a day just on that stuff, as well as all the spam and everything else that comes my way.
That's a lot to get through. I just wanted to share, I have recently started reading again. Very proud of myself. I wanted to share I have gotten really, really into Jason Reynolds, who writes about, I mean, all the books that I've read that I should say I've listened to, because I haven't actually read them, I've listened to them. All of them take place in Black neighborhoods. I wanted to share that I think not only is it for those of us who didn't grow up in those environments, I think it's a little peek into like some of these, experiences that these characters go through. They are just phenomenal books I wanted to share. And the audiobooks are really, really well read and a whole lot of fun to listen to. There's one in particular that's won a bunch of awards. It's called Long Way Down. It's short. As an audiobook, it's only about an hour, 45 minutes. The author does recommend reading it in its original print form. I did not realize, because I listened to it, that it's written in prose. So I think you kind of lose that a little bit in the audiobook. And they said definitely in an ebook, because of formatting changes, it just kind of changes the whole. But I personally think that should be mandatory reading for every junior high and high school kid in the country. And if you have not read it, I very highly recommend it. The other books are really great reads too, but I think that one it particularly impacted me in terms of this work and understanding an experience that is not something I've been through myself. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyone else? Elaine, do you have anything you want to share? I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't.
Well, I just am really appreciative of having Aisha come and join us this evening, and thank you very much. You've just really shown some light on some areas that were kind of lurking out there in the darkness. Darkness comes a little earlier now in August than it did a little earlier in the summer, so we have to be careful about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Aisha, I'm also I'm so glad you're here. Even just getting the list of questions to help me think about how to approach integrating the committee with the interview process really made me feel more confident coming to the meeting. And I think it was incredibly helpful to start with that framework. I think that's one of the things that the committee, as like Matt had pointed out, like we don't really know how to function as a committee, and having that piece was really important, I think, to us moving forward and having less of this back and forth, like the unnecessary back and forth where we go to the board like we want something, we don't know what we want. I think this is going to be much better. So thank you so much.
Thank you, JC.
And anybody else has anything? Fantastic. It was so nice to see you all again. Hopefully Andrew will be feeling better by our next meeting. And yes.
I do have a question. Do we know what the date is for our next meeting?
I mean, I don't know that we exactly do.
Were we going to try to stick with it twice a month, or just stick with once a month for right now?
I think that we could probably do with once a month. I'm not sure what we would do with 2 meetings next month. I mean, I know Aisha and I are going to meet, and so if it's okay with everyone, maybe we'll plan on skipping the September 1st and we'll meet on the 15th, and we'll have a good, strong agenda ready.
That might give Aisha more time to finish her interviews.
And there's
the one thing that I'll just say about that is the board will be meeting on the 8th. And so anything you want to get to us will be delayed by a month. We won't hear it until October. If this committee doesn't meet to the 15th, we won't hear anything until October 13th.
Well, I think I have what I need for the September meeting.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just raising that.
No,
so
thank you. I appreciate that.
Because we have that weird schedule where we only meet once a month and you guys meet twice a month. And so there's kind of a weird imbalance in things.
It is, I know. And once we get into a group with Aisha, I think we'll be able to make it a little bit more regular. Right now, I think it's going to be hard to know whether or not we need to meet before the board or after the board. I think eventually we'll have that figured out, and probably after the board meeting would make sense.
I think you're right, JC. I think this will give Aisha some more time to finish up interviews. And so the 15th is, I think, a good plan.
Fantastic. I will send out a reminder email recapping our decision to cancel the meeting on the 1st. We'll meet on the 15th. Aisha and I will be meeting in between now and then, so we'll be nice and ready for that meeting. And yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate your time, and I am excited for the next leg of our journey.
Same. Thank you, Aisha.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Good to
good
see you
night.
all.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.